The official report called it Routine Evidence Recovery, number 1472. Nothing about it felt routine. The Hargrave townhouse had been sealed since the January fire that gutted its upper floors. The owner, an elderly antiques dealer, was listed as missing, presumed dead. My unit's job was to photograph, tag, and clear the debris before demolition. In practice, that meant breathing soot for 10 hours while making sure nobody pocketed valuables. I'd done these sweeps 100 times. But that day, the air inside the house felt heavier, charged like a storm cell. The wallpaper peeled in long yellow tongues, revealing soot-veined plaster beneath. Every footstep stirred ash that hung mid-air, catching light from my headlamp in dull silver clouds. Room 6, second floor, what had been a nursery. That's where I found the box. It was wedged under a collapsed wardrobe, its lid cracked and warped by heat. Someone had scrawled across it in charcoal, "Property seized. Evidence Room B, return when exposure complete." The handwriting was too neat for a firefighter's, too deliberate for graffiti. I crouched, pried the box open with a gloved hand, and froze. Inside lay an album bound in green leather, corners burned but clasp intact. The gilt letters on the cover still caught my flashlight. Hargrave and Sons Photographers, Chancery Lane, Eston, 1868. Every page stuck slightly as I turned it, the heat having welded them with age. The portraits were typical Victorian fare, long exposures, stiff poses, black glass eyes. Then I reached the one that stopped me. A family of 7, seated before a painted backdrop of curtains and marble columns. Father, high-collared waistcoat, beard trimmed with surgical precision. Mother, hair parted center, gown modest but finely cut. 4 children in matching plaid, and in the mother's arms, an infant. At first glance, nothing unusual. But the longer I stared, the colder my skin grew. The baby's face was blurred, not from motion, the exposure was too sharp elsewhere, but blurred in essence, as if the camera had refused to decide what it was seeing. The cheeks were smeared shades of grey, the eyes shallow dents in the emulsion. The mouth was a soft oval without teeth or tongue, a wound more than a feature. Everything else, lace bonnet, tiny hands, was crystal clear. I held the picture closer. The chemical scent of old silver nitrate bit the back of my throat. A faint glimmer moved beneath the surface, like light behind thick glass. When I tilted it toward my lamp, for the briefest second, the blur aligned into something, a smile far too broad for a baby. I told myself it was my imagination. I slipped the cabinet card into a paper sleeve, labeled it Item 47, photograph, recovered intact, and logged the discovery on my tablet. Then, habit winning over sense, I took a quick phone photo for the evidence database. The flash reflected off the soot film and bounced straight into my eyes. When I blinked away the spots, the image on my screen looked different. The baby's head was tilted left. In the original, it had faced forward. I double-checked, convinced I'd shot at an angle. No, the composition matched perfectly. Only the head had moved. Back at headquarters, I filed the image under Hargrave Fire Evidence Lot 12 and locked the original in Cabinet C17. I told myself to forget it, but every time I passed that cabinet, I felt the temperature drop. 2 days later, the photo was on my desk. No one admitted moving it. Security logs showed no access to the evidence room overnight. The only anomaly was a brief power flicker around 3:14. Someone, or something, had retrieved it. The label now carried faint new writing beneath my own. Do not store in darkness. I decided to trace the studio. A search of public archives yielded a thin dossier. Hargrave and Sons Photographers, 1868 to 1872. They'd specialized in memorial portraits, post-mortem family photographs. Common practice in the 1870s, dressed the deceased, pose them with relatives, and capture one final likeness. The firm closed after chemical accident, cyanide contamination. One fatality, infant, name withheld. An attached newspaper clipping showed the storefront, a narrow building with high windows, the sort of place light struggled to enter. In the window hung sample prints, families, soldiers, infants, and a placard, "We capture what the eye cannot." That night I dreamed of the photograph, not the picture itself, but the act of taking it. I was behind the camera, the old brass lens gleaming. The family sat motionless. The mother whispered something I couldn't hear. Then the baby's head turned toward me, its skin rippling like water. I woke, choking on the taste of chemicals. The next morning, a forensics tech named Priya caught me staring at the print. "You look like that thing's about to bite," she said. I laughed too loudly. "Ever seen a post-mortem shot this sharp?" She squinted. "Maybe a double exposure. Those old plates could trap ghosts of earlier images if you didn't clean them right." She tapped the baby's smudged face. Or maybe they shouldn't have cleaned it at all. Later, when she developed her own scan for spectral analysis, she called me back into the lab. Under UV, new details appeared. The faint outline of wallpaper behind the family, gas lamps, and something else. A shape in the shadows, holding the baby from behind. A man's hands. She backed away. "That's not part of the print, right?" I didn't answer. We sent the data to HQ's digital restoration unit. That night, before the servers finished rendering, Priya went home. She never made it. Her car was found idling in the parking garage, door open, driver's seat empty. On the passenger side, lying neatly on the cushion, was an empty photo sleeve marked Item 47. Developed. I knew before opening my inbox what I'd find. An automated system notification timestamped 0003. Image render complete. File name, exposure_complete.jpg. I didn't open it, not yet. By dawn, Command had sealed the evidence room pending inquiry. I was ordered to take leave. Instead, I drove to Chancery Lane. The Hargrave building was still there. Number 47, a narrow brick facade wedged between a tailor and a solicitor's office. The top floors had long since collapsed, the windows boarded, but the carved sign above the door remained legible beneath grime. H&S Photographers. A demolition notice flapped in the wind. The lock was so old it broke under my multi-tool. Inside smelled of damp wood and old fixer fluid, that sweet metallic scent of dissolved silver. Dust motes spun in the weak beam of my flashlight. The front room still held the backdrop curtains from the newspaper photo, now black with mildew. A long rotted camera tripod stood in the center, its bellows collapsed like an empty lung. The floor creaked under my boots. Somewhere above, something moved. I told myself it was rats. I told myself to leave. Instead, I followed the sound. Upstairs, the walls were lined with shelves of glass negatives stacked like books, thousands of them, each labeled in copperplate script. Most had melted into cloudy mirrors, but some still caught my light, frozen faces staring back through layers of decay. Near the back wall, one plate remained upright in a wooden frame, cleaner than the rest. Beneath it, a brass plaque. Family portrait, March 1870. I lifted it carefully. The reverse side gleamed faintly, the silver backing still bright. Beneath the grime, I could make out the same 7 figures. Only the baby looked straight at me. I felt a vibration through the glass, so faint I thought it was my pulse. Then the surface misted over from the inside. Words traced themselves in condensation. "Bring me home." A loud snap behind me. Wood splintering. The tripod camera had shifted upright on its own, lens facing the room. The shutter clicked open. I caught my reflection in the brass, pale, wide-eyed, and then a blinding flash. When I could see again, the plate was clear, the image gone. But on the wall where it had hung, a fresh photograph had appeared. Modern paper, still damp from chemicals. It showed me standing exactly where I was, camera glare washing half my face white. In my arms, something small wrapped in cloth. They logged the photograph as potential evidence in Priya's disappearance, though no one wrote that aloud in the report. Officially, it was recovered print, anomalous origin. Unofficially, everyone avoided looking at it for more than a few seconds. The print still glistened with moisture when they sealed it in a polyethylene sleeve. The technician who catalogued it, Morris, joked that it looked fresh out of the darkroom. He stopped joking a few minutes later when the sleeve fogged from the inside and stayed warm to the touch. By the time I reached the evidence room, the photo had dried. The image was clear again, the same family, the same 1870 backdrop, but I wasn't in it anymore. The man in my place was older, bald, wearing a constable's uniform from the period. His eyes looked tired, not afraid, as if he'd expected to be there. Someone asked if the print could be double exposed. I wanted to believe it. That night, I reviewed the Hargrave file again. The old studio had been shuttered in 1872 after the chemical accident, but I found a later note, 1873, mentioning a second investigation. Unlicensed anatomical photography suspected. The lead inspector's name was Edward Hale. When I checked the police museum's database for portraits of historic officers, one matched the new face in the print. Hale had gone missing during the case. The CCTV footage from the evidence vault finally came through. I watched it alone, half dreading, half needing to see. At 2:17 a.m., the corridor lights flickered. A faint shimmer rolled across the security glass, like heat over tarmac. Then the cabinet door eased open by itself. No figure, no hand, just darkness spilling outward. The photograph floated free, hovering for a heartbeat before dropping to the floor. The camera shook once, as if the whole room exhaled, and the feed cut out. The timestamp on the reboot read 2:19. Priya's keycard pinged the exit gate at 2:18. I brought the information to Superintendent Grant. He scanned my printouts, frowned, and pushed them back. "You're tired, that's all. You've been staring at negatives too long." "Sir, that house was owned by the same Hargrave line. The baby in that photograph." "It's evidence," he said flatly. "Not a haunting. Drop it." I didn't. After midnight, I drove back to Chancery Lane. I told myself I was going to check the site one last time, collect a few samples for chemistry, maybe prove the fumes from old Fixer were hallucinogenic. But deep down I knew I was returning because the photograph wanted me to. The studio was colder now, stripped of its former humidity. Moonlight fell through a hole in the ceiling, striking the camera tripod exactly where I'd left it. The walls, once lined with negatives, were bare, every glass plate gone. In the center of the room sat the evidence box from the Hargrave house. The tag had changed. It no longer read "property seized, return when exposure complete." It said "ready for final print." I opened it. Inside lay dozens of small glass plates, each no larger than a postcard. Every one contained the same infant, captured at slightly different stages of decay. Eyes open, eyes closed, mouth widening into something that was never a smile. On the last plate, the baby's features had sharpened into a man's. My stomach turned, but I couldn't look away. The etched date at the bottom of the final plate wasn't 1870. It was the current year. The air trembled. A faint mechanical click came from the tripod. I turned. The camera's bellows were expanding, drawing breath. The lens pointed directly at me. Behind it, in the darkness where the photographer should stand, a figure materialized, tall, thin, wearing a soot-streaked apron. His hands were black up to the wrists, his face hidden behind a gauze mask. He lifted a flashpan, struck a match. Light erupted. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the floor. The plates were gone. My skin smelled of ether and smoke. On the far wall, still wet, a new print was developing by itself, a contact image forming in reverse as chemicals seeped from the plaster. It showed the same family, the same composition, but the baby was gone. The mother's arms were empty, and at the edge of the frame, half-formed, was my own outline, kneeling, reaching toward them. I ran. Back at headquarters, I tried to convince myself it was exposure poisoning, hallucination, something rational. But when I opened the evidence locker, a damp photograph lay on the top shelf. It was me, standing in the Hargrave studio, holding a child wrapped in cloth. The caption underneath, scrawled in graphite. Second attempt, light improved. The morning after the incident, I was placed on leave. Officially, it was stress. Unofficially, they thought I'd tampered with evidence. Grant wouldn't look me in the eye during the debrief. He kept repeating the same line, "You're not well, go home." I didn't go home. Instead, I drove straight back to the Hargrave townhouse. The demolition notice had been postponed pending a new inspection, and police tape still clung to the iron gate. The air smelled of rain and char. Somewhere inside, water dripped rhythmically, the sound of an empty building remembering it used to live. I followed the same path upstairs to the studio, but the room wasn't empty anymore. Rows of photographs now hung on the walls, pegged to wires like laundry. Every print was identical, the Hargrave family in their Sunday best, faces solemn. But each time my flashlight crossed them, a new variation appeared. The baby shifting slightly from frame to frame, a stop-motion crawl through impossible time. In the final photo, the baby sat alone on the floor. The adults had vanished. A noise behind me, soft, deliberate. The creak of a footboard. I turned. The same brass camera stood there, lens cap removed, its bellows slowly expanding and contracting. Breathing. The air tightened around me. I forced myself to speak, my voice smaller than I expected. "What do you want?" The whisper came from everywhere at once, layered, male and female, old and infantile. "Finish the exposure." The camera clicked. Light exploded across the room. Not the white of a bulb, but amber, chemical, like flame trapped under glass. My shadow stretched impossibly long against the wall, merging with the others. When the light died, I was no longer holding my flashlight. In its place was an envelope, heavy and damp. Inside lay a fresh photograph. 13 figures this time, not 7, all police uniforms. One of them was Priya, another was me. Beneath the image, the same inscription as before. "Return when exposure complete." I stumbled out into the rain. My vision swam with ghost flashes, the afterimage of the bulb still etched in my eyes. I wanted to destroy the photograph, to burn it, but fire was useless against that paper. The Hargrave fire had proven that. So I went to the only place still keeping the originals, the evidence vault. The night guard, Davies, owed me a favor. I told him I needed to check serial numbers for the missing prints. He didn't ask why. He just unlocked the gate and left me with the hum of fluorescent lights. Cabinet C-17 waited in the back corner, drawer slightly ajar. The air smelled faintly of formaldehyde and wet ink. I pulled the folder. Inside was the first photo, the 1870 family portrait, still sealed, edges warped from moisture. But now, beneath it, another lay pressed to the backing board, a mirrored version, newly printed. The mother's face had changed, her expression soft, almost relieved. The baby looked straight at me, no longer blurred, and its face was mine. The lights flickered once, twice, then died. In the dark, I heard the metallic chick of a shutter. My flashlight refused to turn on. The beam blinked weakly, illuminating only dust drifting like silver ash. Then a voice, close, too close. "Exposure needs darkness." The flashlight fell from my hand and rolled across the tiles, its circle of light swinging up onto the cabinet. There, reflected in the glass of the evidence frame, stood a figure in 19th century attire. Sleeves rolled to the elbows, apron streaked with fixer. His face was the same one I'd glimpsed in the Hargrave studio, blurred at the edges like wet paint. He lifted the camera I couldn't see, whispered something I couldn't hear, and everything went white. When I woke, I was on the morgue table. My badge lay beside me. Grant stood at the end of the room, his face grey with sleeplessness. "You passed out in the vault," he said quietly. "Davies found you. The power's been cutting in and out all night." He hesitated, then placed a folder on my chest. We pulled the security footage. Inside were still frames from the vault camera. The timestamp read 2:14, the same minute Priya had vanished. Each frame showed me standing in front of the cabinet, turning as though to face someone unseen. Then the bulb above me flared so bright, the lens overexposed. When the feed returned, I was gone. In my place stood a man in Victorian clothing, motion blurred, half transparent. The folder ended there. That night, I packed a bag and booked a room on the edge of the city. I told myself I'd rest, then turn everything over to the Met's paranormal unit, let them deal with the madness. But as I closed the curtains, I noticed something taped to the window. An old photograph, the same family. This time the baby held a camera. I didn't sleep. Every time I shut my eyes, the flash came back. Amber, chemical, searing the backs of my eyelids. By 4 a.m., I gave up, pulled on my jacket, and drove. I wasn't sure where until I saw the sign for Metropolitan Police Evidence Storage, Unit B. If the photograph wanted darkness, I would give it one last room to drown in. The facility was empty except for the night supervisor. I told him the superintendent had ordered me to transfer a file. He waved me through. The corridors smelled of paper, ozone, and that faint metallic sweetness I now knew too well. In the basement, I found an unused darkroom, one of the old forensic labs decommissioned years ago. The red safety bulb still worked. On the counter stood trays, bottles, a sink stained with decades of chemicals. I set the 1870 print beneath the light. "Let's finish this," I whispered. The baby's eyes glimmered like droplets of mercury. I poured developer into the tray and submerged the photograph. The paper darkened instantly, ripples forming on the surface. For a heartbeat, I saw my own reflection distorted by the liquid. Then it wasn't my face anymore. It was Merrick's from the military story, or maybe the Hargrave photographers, every image I'd ever handled staring back through the bath. A voice rose from the fluid, not loud, but absolute. "Light remembers." The room trembled. The red bulb flickered, strobing between centuries. The lab became the Hargrave studio, then the modern vault, then a parlor lit by gas lamps. Each flicker rearranged me in space, sometimes behind the camera, sometimes in the frame. When the bulb steadied, the air was thick with smoke. Figures stood around me. The Hargrave family, Priya, Superintendent Grant, even the missing Inspector Hale. All pale, all still, eyes reflecting the same dull light. The mother stepped forward, cradling nothing. "Finish the exposure," she said. Her lips didn't move. The words came from the hiss of the developing tray. I reached for the photo. The surface was hot. Beneath the liquid, an image was forming. Someone lying on the morgue table, eyes closed, my badge beside him. It was me. I snatched the print out of the tray, shaking off the chemicals. The paper smoked, edges curling, but the image held. My own face stared back, mouth slightly open, a blur around the pupils where light had burned too long. "Why me?" I said. The answer came from everywhere. "You looked." The red bulb burst. Darkness slammed down. I woke, or thought I did, to the click of a camera shutter. The smell of collodion was thick enough to sting. My hands were gloved, my chest constricted by an apron's ties. Across from me, On the stool beneath the backdrop sat a family of 7, a Victorian family. The father's beard was immaculate. The mother's eyes waited for my signal. In her lap, the baby shifted, small fists clenching. The skin around its mouth was grey, unfinished. It stared at me, recognition blooming where life should have been. "Hold still," I heard myself say. The magnesium flash flared, drowning sound. Daylight returned slowly. I was sitting on the steps outside the Hargrave townhouse, soot on my palms, the world moving at normal speed again. A constable approached, notebook in hand. "Sir, did you report the fire?" he asked. Behind him the building burned quietly, orange through the fog. I couldn't answer. In my coat pocket, something crinkled. I pulled it out. A fresh photograph, edges wet, cooling in the morning air. It showed the family exactly as before, but the photographer was visible this time, standing behind the camera, smoke curling around his head. His face was mine. I turned the print over. The inscription was written in a hand that wasn't mine, but felt familiar. "Exposure complete. Archive safely." The official record states that the Hargrave site collapsed completely that day. No human remains were recovered. The investigation closed without charges. Evidence lot 47 was lost in the fire. That should have been the end. Yet every few months a new photograph surfaces. Attics, estate sales, forgotten boxes. Always the same arrangement. Always 7 faces. Always a baby whose features refuse to stay still. Police labs log them as curiosities, chemical anomalies. And sometimes, when they scan the negatives, another figure appears in the background. Modern clothing, gloves, a badge number barely legible. My badge number. I'm writing this because the newest one arrived this morning. Courier envelope, no return address. Inside, a glass plate. The emulsion is fresh, tacky to the touch. The image is forming as I watch. My desk, this page, my hands. The light in the room is dimming, turning that same amber shade I've seen 100 times. Somewhere nearby, a shutter clicks. If anyone finds this note, burn the plate. Do not photograph it. Do not let it remember you. Because light never dies. It only waits for the next face to catch.